Hello, Kingsley.
Hello, Mannah.
Hi.
Good
There you are.
morning.
Good morning. There you
Here we
are.
are again.
Yes. Yeah. I'm already recording. Are you okay with that?
Yes, I'm okay. I'm not going to say anything libel or anything. It's okay. Yeah, I'm sure you're going to edit this out. Maybe it doesn't matter. I'm not nothing to hide. It's been a while. I mean, time just has just flown by because I didn't realize when I got back in touch that we're already in March.
Yeah. April. I mean, and
Almost.
yeah, we are we're just on the verge of April, and we were texting, I think, in December last year because I have read your book. I had read your book right there about the modern seeker.
Mhm.
So that is what we wanted to talk about. I just want to say welcome everyone who's listening. I feel this is my second interview with Kingsley Dennis, but it's also yours in a way, because if you think about time in a non-linear, weird kind of sense, then yeah, you are influencing this as well as you are listening and participating wherever you are. But so the setup was to speak about the Modern Seeker, one of your books, but it has not escaped me, Kingsley, that you are now out with a new book.
Yes, I am. I mean, and welcome, Mannah, and everyone who's listening. You're right, this is our second conversation, but I'd like to just think of it as an extended conversation from the
Yeah,
previous one, because as
yeah,
we just said, time just doesn't seem to have just evaporated. So it's a continued conversation, and I'm happy to speak about whatever you wish, because even though we mentioned books, we're talking about themes in the books that we hope is of interest to everybody, not just the book itself. So I'm happy to go anywhere you wish to go. You mentioned The Modern Seeker, which was a previous book. Actually, I can't remember when it was published, 2022 was something, or 21, 21.
yes, close to 2020, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, 2020. And the one is coming out 31st of March, which I think is tomorrow as we're recording.
that's
And
tomorrow.
yeah, although it's been in gestation for a while, for a number of years, but it was finalized recently. So yes, so all things are happening. And let's take this conversation where you wish.
Good. Well, I do want to, for my older self, go back to some notes that I had after reading your book. I did a whole thing on it in a Danish podcast, walking through it. And so when I saw my notes for you in an email I sent you, I was like, that's really short. I felt like I had sent so much, but that's because I did that work in the Danish podcast. But there was this key piece that I wanted to ask you about. So you're talking about the perennial path, and I kind of want you to explain that again. And then if the perennial path is the same as psychotherapy, and then on the other hand, it's something that where you feel the psychological language is less than a greater truth. I just kind of want to talk to you about that field.
Sure. Um, and I remembered you sent me some notes, but I haven't looked at them since December because I prefer to speak spontaneously. So I have no idea really what you sent me, apart from your focus on psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Um, Now, the book, what I was trying to explain was the path of what I call the perennial psychology. What I mean by this is that there is a path called the perennial philosophy, or the perennial tradition, as it's generally called. And what that is basically the heart of all spiritual or developmental paths that run through all religious traditions. So the heart of all the um, the mainstream traditions, or the well-known institutionalized or orthodox traditions, there's also a core heart, which is the development of the human being. Some people refer to this as the esoteric heart of the religions. And what this means is that religions or traditions are the carriers of an inherent wisdom. And the carriers change according to time and place and the expression. So, of course, all the major religions birthed in a particular part of the world with a particular culture and particular language. And so, but there's a wisdom tradition that moves through humanity always.
Mm.
There's always a wisdom available to humanity. Otherwise, we wouldn't not have survived until now. And so the perennial tradition, that's why it's called perennial, and tradition, everlasting, uses vehicles and carriers to pass on its wisdom through civilizations and through millennia. Now, recently in the 20th century, it's been called the perennial philosophy, to take it away from certain religious connotations. What I wanted to do is speak about this developmental path, but also I feel philosophy is inadequate as a word because it seems too mental, too intellectual. And also, you see, what's happened in the last century or the last, 80 years or less, is that we've had a new science coming out, which is the science of psychology.
Yeah.
We have depth psychology, and really, we've had a new language to express the inner core of the human being, because before psychology and before Freud and Jung, people weren't talking about the unconscious or the subconscious or the id. So what I wanted to say is that there's a developmental tradition always available, but now we have a language which is more perhaps suited to a modern person who can look at themselves and look at developmental possibilities within themselves through a language of psychology, which I think gives new tools for the modern person. So, in a nutshell, that's the perennial psychology, looking at the long wisdom traditions that have always been there, but trying to give people a new vocabulary, a new framework to move into that understanding.
Yeah. And thank you for that explanation. But then I feel you also have a critique because this is the one side of it where there is a modern language for the human psyche and well-being, and then there's a critique I find in often in spiritual traditions, and now in you as well, about that you have to be emotional stable in order to follow a certain spiritual discipline.
Mhm.
Do you recognize that?
I do recognize it, and there is a point there, and let's kind of flesh this out because it's not a criticism against psychotherapy or psychotherapeutic therapeutic traditions. It's having to use them in the correct way. Now, what I'm saying is that, and this has always been the case, is that some people um, have a tendency to substitute one thing for another rather than use them in balance. So,
Mm.
for example, a lot of people generally, it's well known in occult traditions that a lot of people jump into the occult because um, you know they want to substitute it for some lack in life. They want to they feel ostracized or they don't feel a part of society. And there's always been this area where um, something has been a substitute to look at ourselves. And so the wisdom traditions say that, well, this path needs a balanced person because obviously you're going deep into yourself. And if you want to go down the line further, you have to be able to um, observe yourself critically and objectively and to rebalance yourself because society generally functions largely through emotions, emotional manipulation, emotional stimuli, and these impulses or conditioning, social conditioning, is heavily emotionally based. We know that from our entertainment industry and our
Mhm.
propaganda and our news, they approach people through the emotions. So to go further into yourself, you have to decondition yourself, which is emotionally difficult. And it can unbalance your emotions if you start to peel away the layers of the onion.
Mhm.
So you need to be balanced. So psychotherapy practices can work in junction together to help people be look at themselves and to discover themselves and to be emotionally balanced. But there's a tendency, or there has been in developmental paths, that people push away the developmental path and go 100% wholly down the therapeutic, and they think this is everything. And so they think it's a substitute for the developmental or spiritual path. And that's what I'm kind of warning against, is that um,
Right.
they have to be worked together in a way that the therapeutic path prepares a person to integrate them into the developmental path, but don't push away the work necessary on the developmental path.
Mm.
So I think there's a tendency to do that, which is why I was warning against, but not one without the other. They can work together, but they have to be collaborative, in balance, and
Mm.
substitute.
This is really good. And I would like to keep on fleshing that out because huh. Yeah, I can hear just even the question like, oh, you have to be emotionally stable. It sounds like, yeah, of course you have. There has to be some kind of stability, a basis for you in order to go into the occult that you mentioned or whatever lineage you, or whatever path you want to go into, because otherwise you can abuse it, right? You can misuse the knowledge. Like, say, with astrology, you know,
Mhm.
it's easy to misuse that if you're not really in contact with yourself, if you're making a lot of judgments around yourself, for example, you're just going to be very judgmental from whatever you see in people's charts, you know. So there's a kind of like, yeah, of course, in that. But then what I feel, because then you say some will just only go the therapeutic route, as I hear you, right?
May only go therapeutic route.
May,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
I would just love for there to be a complete union between the two. That it's not like you have to develop your spirit and then you have to develop your emotions, but like that there's some kind of because I think my question, of course, comes from being judged myself around not being emotionally stable, and I just that there's a long way if I have to wait for that in order for me to go to something spiritual.
Yes, I mean, you don't, I mean, it's very hard to start. I mean, no one starts as a complete person. That's, we want to be a complete person. That's the path. And also, you mentioned that, an emotional, unbalanced person may use the materials, but on the reverse, the materials may use you. And that's the thing I'm warning against because,
Oh,
um, there are faculties which if a person is not prepared, it can target their ego, for example. This happens a lot in occult areas, for example, and in the spiritual area too. We see lots of people who all of a sudden get a guru syndrome, or I want to lead lots of people, and we know there's lots of abuse in the spiritual domain, of people abusing their disciples or people who are looking up to them. So you see. Um,
mm,
when you open yourself to other forces, or let's say higher forces, which are necessary to come in to develop you, um, if you're really out of balance, then you may not have the self-observation necessary to realize that you're being manipulated, or you're being taken. They're using you rather than you using the tools. So that's
huh,
one thing to say. Another thing, you mentioned about, yeah, the psychotherapy is a tool and the developmental path is a tool. So
yeah.
yes, ideally both tools work together. For example, if you have a nail, you need a hammer because you
Mm,
can't put the nail in without a hammer.
yeah.
But you don't put a nail in with a ruler or a pitchfork. So two tools have to be in harmony to
Mm,
work together. So that's why therapeutic practices can, as our tool, and the developmental path are a tool also. They're two tools that can work together, but you need to be in harmony and you need the other one as well.
mm,
So that's another thing to say. And the third thing to say, excuse me if I'm speaking a lot, the
no
third
problem.
thing to say is it's a very popular criticism from mainstream society to look at a person who doesn't seem to follow the consensus narrative and say, "Oh, you're emotionally unbalanced. You're this. You're a crackpot. You're a conspiracy person,"
Yeah.
because you don't fit into the narrative. But you need to look at when that kind of language comes to you. Again, a part of the developmental path is to not to accept something immediately, but to observe it and say, is that judgment or criticism fair? Where's it coming from? Should I take it personally or not? Because often, most criticism comes from a source which itself is not a balanced or credible source. So
Mm,
even emotional unbalancement as a criticism often is not fair and not valid.
mm. Ah, good, good. And but so do you see this? So this, I guess, warning that you have in the book, just the way that you say it, that can you see that it is quite common when people talk about spiritual disciplines that they somehow there's a necessity around, yeah, the emotional part somehow.
Yes, I mean, it does get talked about a lot. Again, it's how you talk about it. And you see, what my approach is that, of course, as I mentioned, developmental path needs first deconditioning because we
Yeah.
have to recognize we are socially conditioned creatures or species. We live in a society which heavily conditions us, and we may not be
That's the
aware
big
of
one.
that. Yeah,
That's the big
that's
one.
it is. I mean, even to realize it. I
Yeah.
mean, as the phrase says, unless you see the prison bars, you don't realize you're in a prison.
Mhm.
So you have to realize it that most things we have as opinions or characteristics or behaviorisms are conditioned depending not only the culture we're born into, but the impacts of our immediate environment and the
Mhm.
impacts we receive from the larger environment, i.e., the culture of our time and its transmissions, entertainment, programming, propaganda. So if we're going to strip away that conditioning, it makes us vulnerable. And if we're not prepared inside, that vulnerability can be difficult, even painful. And it can make things worse. It makes us more vulnerable. So that's why we have to put emotions in their place. So when we come to observe ourselves without the conditioning, we're not shocked. We don't panic.
Mm.
And we look at it from a stable perspective, as objective as possible. That's why I say the emotions are very important. Not because, not, not from a general point of view, but from a preparation point of view.
And what I feel is happening today, at least in the trauma therapeutic movements that I've been involved in, is that we're doing that exact same thing. That is deconditioning. That is reprogramming, whatever you want to call it. That is actually what's going on in therapy. First of all, classically, you would go back to your background, your childhood, right? That's a deconditioning because you have to realize what happened to you and what did you not receive from your parents. So even that in a very traditional way, and then all of your survival strategies, all of your different parts to you, all of your automatic responses from your nervous system, all of that is something that we look at in therapy. Do you see? So in a way, that
Mhm.
is deconditioning. And so I find that there should not be a split because to my experience, there is not a split.
No, I mean, that's it. And that's why I'm saying the two tools should work together rather
Uh,
than being completely split. Because you're right. You know, good, genuine therapeutic practices allow a person to be aware of why they are as they are, because it takes them back. So after deconditioning, the major question is, then what? What do you replace it with? Because there's the danger, and this happens a lot in corrupt spiritual practices, they replace the deconditioning with another programming. And
mm,
that's when you get cult problems. Because cults I mean, spiritual cults, we are very aware of them. They're very clever because they do the deconditioning and then they reprogram the person with their own conditioning of this cult is the only one for you, it's the only answer. And that's why cultish behavior is so obsessive because they've been programmed or you could say brainwashed. So
mm,
it's very important that once you've done the deconditioning, then what do you provide? And
mm,
that's what distinguishes a genuine path from a corrupt path. And so we have to be aware of that. And a genuine developmental or perennial path tries to replace that with your own awareness and observation, and you try to replace it with something which is from you, not from your ego or your society. And so they can work together, but what comes next?
mm. Yeah, and that's just where I find also in therapy, I feel I'm like a representative of of therapists always, but I'm very spiritual, I'm an astrologer and so it's not. they don't maybe want me in their fold, all therapists. But I just find that therapeutic space to be so sacred, where exactly that it's not only deconditioning, that's it becoming self-aware of your patterns, and but also that then now you're in contact with your higher self. And that's is in a way the new programming, not something that I as a therapist desired for you, but you are in touch with what's better for you.
Hmm. Yeah, but we talk about these high influences or higher forces. When you're declogged, as it were, or deblocked, then you're more accessible to these higher forces and inspiration and your greater self coming into communication and contact with you. And that's important to recognize that. And as you kind of mentioned with a joke that even some therapeutics don't agree with you because again, even everything becomes institutionalized in our world. Spiritual path becomes institutionalized. They become dogma and ritual, and even therapies become institutionalized. And you need to go to a certain accreditation. You have to have certain initials after your name to be allowed into the club. So
Yeah.
so we have to be aware that that's part of the conditioning. That even something which seemed genuine in the beginning can still be corrupted by society into a ritual, institutionalized edifice. The path is fraught with many dangers. It's not easy to walk this path. It seems easy, but culture in our society has many things to throw at us.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. And returning to the perennial path, which is this wisdom that you explained in the beginning that has been there throughout all times, not just the religious era, but whatever time we've been in. And then what we're talking about now, I guess, is that how I find it comes through in therapy, really. That's how I
And
find it.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure some people will be asking, well, what is this perennial path?
Yeah.
It's always been there. It's like the little baby fish that goes to the big fish and with their burning question, saying, "I have a burning question. What's this thing called water?" You know, it's all around us, but it's not so easily graspable
Mm.
because we have to come to it from ourselves, and that's the thing. If we can develop ourselves or work on ourselves, observe ourselves, clean ourselves to a place where we're more open, then we can receive influences that we can recognize. And there is wisdom all around, and your higher self is waiting to contact you. So we have to be prepared for that. And I think a lot of institutions try to come in and like saying this is our territory. You have to follow our rules. No, we have to find it through ourselves. There is no one definition of
Mm.
this. That's important because we have to find it through ourselves. Um, and also, if you remember in the book, I gave one chapter totally dedicated to humor.
Ah, yeah.
Because I think that's part of that. That's very important. If we can't have humor, if we can't laugh, then we're still a bit too rigid. And also, humor helps to break down barriers, as well. It helps us to see some of the idiocracies that are some of the yeah, idiocracies that our culture and society has. So humor gets past some of these blockages as well. So and humor also prepares us. It makes us a bit more ready to face difficulties if we can have that ability to have a smile.
Okay, I feel like you're almost answering something here that I was thinking about now that you bring up humor, because another critique that I guess I have when I hear people talk about how to follow a spiritual path is that it becomes, like you say, a bit rigid. Like you have to rid yourself from the ego, and you have to cleanse yourself. You said cleaning, and it's just sometimes it becomes a little bit too hard rather
Mhm.
than compassionate, and rather like understanding that it's not like your ego is really a sick part of you. It's actually just like a trauma response or whatever. However, you can look at it more compassionately. So yeah, that's my last critique of this, and then I have other questions for
Yeah,
you.
sure, and I totally agree with you. And I, you know, Humor really kind of makes you flexible as well. And I mean, we talk about the spiritual path. Even I really don't tend to use that word spiritual too much because again, it's become institutionalized. It's been hijacked and claimed. The UR, www.spirituality.com has been claimed already. Um, so
What was that website?
no, I mean, I'm making a joke. It's
Okay.
like, it's as if the word spirituality has been made a URL website. It's been bought and paid for, you know. So spirituality again is a word that has a lot of baggage, which is why I try to talk about a developmental path. A
Mm,
spiritual path, people think, oh, I have to believe in a God or I have to have a certain religious orientation. No, it's developing your inner self to contact your higher self and to be a more complete person. It's developmental.
mm,
Um, so yes, but a lot of traditions try to block it into you have to do this ritual, you have to do that, and it's put a lot of people off, and people are leaving religions in crowds. Religions are really losing a lot of adherents because they've become institutionalized and in some places corrupt organizations. But this should not take us away from the necessity in modern life to find a contact within yourself to something beyond or something higher. That's
sure.
imperative. Don't let the kind of corruption or the institutionalization put you off. Um, and yes, and institutions don't have many smiles or laughs these days, which is a sign that they've become crystallized, inflexible.
Mm,
If it's inflexible, it's no good because a developmental path has to change, changes over time, changes according to the people,
mm,
according to the place. So it has to be flexible. Anything rigid can't change. Bad sign.
yeah, yeah, that's good. That's even how it is with astrology, where when I began with that, I was so worried that I got it wrong. I was, just not saying the right thing and in the right way. And there's a that's a value to that being having a conscience, but it's context based astrology, right?
Hmm.
So we can use it in whatever context we're in now. We don't have to like look back at ancient times because that was their context.
Hmm.
So
Exactly. Yeah. We have to allow for, you know, everything evolves and changes. We have to allow for that. No place in the river. You never step into the same place in the river twice, as they say.
yeah.
Everything's moving. So yes, I mean, yeah, that flexibility is a good sign in things.
So in a way, it seems like we agree after all. I just felt like I had really critical questions for you. Do you ever read your own books back? Do you read them again after a while?
No, I don't actually. I rarely do. I really do. Some guy
Thought
maybe.
so.
I mean, depending what book it is. If it's a shorter book of something, I may dip into, but actually not. And sometimes there's a lot of books I have very little memory of consciously writing them. When I'm working in them, I'm in a different space, and
Mm,
I've had people quote me back from my books, and I say, is that me? I have no idea. I
that's
don't
fun.
recognize it because it's something again. Work, I think, things flow through us,
Yeah,
and sometimes we are more conscious of that flow. We participate more. Sometimes we step back more and just let it flow.
yeah,
So, and I'm sure you're aware of that in your own work. Some aspects you remember more than other aspects, depending
sure.
if how involved you were in the transmission.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So just if you ever, when you're old enough to not have anything else to do, then you should read The Modern Seeker and then let me know if you can understand why I felt this way a little bit,
Yeah.
right?
I'm sure I
That would
mean,
be
when
an
you said,
experiment.
I'm sure I probably could understand. Again, part of the flexibility is to understand other perspectives, know, and to allow for others' perspective. So when you first sent me the questions, I said, yeah, I can understand that why you're asking this, and I know I feel I can answer them.
Mhm.
Um, the answers may or may not be for you, but I can answer them, and you take them. I take your perspective, you take my response. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That,
No,
that
it's
that's how good communication operates.
it's it's really good. And times are changing and it's It's no, it's really inspiring to hear you answer this. And but the thing is also with you, Kingsley, that you have a sharp pen, right? So sometimes this happens.
Mhm.
You trigger you trigger people, and it's a
Uh,
good thing. I mean, it would have been boring otherwise. Like this made me think about something and like, what is the difference between this perennial path and what I'm doing in trauma therapy? That is what I asked myself, right? And that I wouldn't have gone to that place in myself if you didn't have a little bit of a bullet.
Well, it probably does, and as you say, if it functions, it functions.
Do you agree? Do you agree that you have a sharp pin?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what a sharp pen really would mean in my work. I I would like to think that my work catalyzes people to think,
It's
stimulates people. I'd like to think it stimulates people.
yeah, that's good.
Mm.
That's good. It stimulates people. It's you have a Mars Mercury conjunction, and so that's where I see it in your chart, and you can say a passionate writer, a passionate communicator.
That's fair.
But sometimes passion is also related to anger.
It can be. It can be. I mean, being a passionate writer or a sharp pen, I mean, I would accept that. I would not. I would be. Um, I mean, I would seriously look at myself because one thing I don't want to be. I don't want to be um, offensive. I
No, no,
I
no,
don't want to be offensive. I don't want to hurt people. I would never
no, no,
want to
no.
do that. So if my work if someone said your work hurt me, I would look at it and said, why is that? And have I mis mispresented something?
For sure.
So and I think some people like to be deliberately provocative. I don't want to be provocative. I want to be stimulating. There's a difference, and
Yeah.
we can
Okay.
be stimulated in a positive way, or we can be stimulated in a provocative way, which is, I don't want to do that. I want to be stimulated
Right.
in a constructive way. Because every person who reads, or any person who receives an influence, whether it's a text or a film or a word, um, reacts to it according to themselves also. So
Yeah,
you never know how someone's going to respond to something. There are as many ways a person responds according to as many people in the world. Everyone responds differently.
for
And you
sure.
you can't cover that base. But you want
No.
to make sure that however they respond, it's in a constructive way as possible.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's always about the person who's receiving it. I mean, the one being triggered also needs to look at herself. Why is that?
Themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. So, okay, but I want to just look at my notes here because you also talk about it as a crisis at a soulful level and a crisis of the inner self. There's not a question for this. I don't know.
Hmm.
But do you remember this piece?
I don't remember specifically, but I know I have spoken on that theme in the book. And maybe your question is, why did I use the word crisis?
Yeah,
Um,
let's go there.
well, as I mentioned before, with I think what's happened in society is that because of there being so much disillusionment with religion or the spiritual path, because there's so much corruption of the path, and there's so many influences in society which are heavily materialistic, that our human culture, especially largely in the West and the industrialized nations, they've presented a culture which conditions people to cut themselves off from their inner soul, let's say, or inner spirit, or the spiritual developmental impulses,
Yeah.
and that is what hardens us. And I think that's the danger right now in our heavily materialistic societies, because we're in a realm of deep technology, of people are speaking of transhumanism. People are merging with their devices and walking around all the time with their phone. And I talked a lot about this in a previous book last year called The Threshold, um, the forces of deep materialism and the struggle for the human soul,
Mhm.
because materialistic forces in life combined with a disillusionment or an inability of religious or spiritual path to provide adequately, the result is people just close down. And they may not consciously close down. It's just that they haven't found the correct impulses to nourish them. So they close down,
They
especially
close down because of the technology.
because of influences of materialism.
Okay,
They,
yeah.
they stop think they think, well, there is no higher power. We live in a material world and technology is the future only. Um, and of course, they think, well, the religions are corrupt, the church is corrupt, there's lots of abuse of power and control over people and money, and they see no pathway into a spiritual path because it may be gurus or online courses wanting your money too much for so-called spiritual retreats, and then you have churches abusing people and money. I think, well, it's obvious that there is no kind of spiritual genuine impulse there, and the future is materialism and technology, so that closes us down. And
Mm.
that's a spiritual crisis because these influences close us down, and therefore it's harder for developmental impulses or the nurturing impulses to get into us because we've naturally closed down.
That's another piece of this puzzle we've been trying to put together, right? Like that it's harder for, isn't that what you said? It's harder to do the therapeutic work if you're already, well, that's maybe what you're talking about with conditioning. This is part of
Yeah,
conditioning that you're talking
yeah,
about now.
yeah.
If,
And the conditioning hasn't got to a higher level now. Before, conditioning was, through, let's say, education and through the media and through entertainment. Now it's coming from all sides. It's coming through our technology.
Mhm.
It's coming through like I said, the corruption of these other pathways. And so this is just, we're being bombarded by this idea that everything is materialistic and there's no other path available. And so, yes, so the development to open up, whether through therapeutic or any developmental path, becomes much harder because we're getting hardened by these materialistic influences.
Ah. And but then you say that the purpose of mankind is a transformational one. So on this perennial path, on the wisdom tradition we're talking about, there's this core of transformation that you need to
Mhm.
change that.
Yes. I mean, as we mentioned before, everything's about evolving and changing, and transformation is ongoing. Nature transforms all the time. We see that. Humanity is here to transform along with the world around it in a correct natural way. So imagine if, and I do, my point of perspective is that the point of humanity has a necessity to transform itself always in a betterment, in a developmental way. If that's our purpose and we're not allowed to do that, we're being blocked to it, then what isn't it understandable why so many people are lost in the world or sad or depressed or turning to extreme substitutes such as addictions and entertainments or something because we have this deep, deep longing inside us. At a soul level, we know that we're not accomplishing what is our natural tendency, our natural pathway on this planet. That's what is damaging a lot of humanity. So we're going into crazy outlets, we're going into extremes, and because we're trying to feed the longing, but not realizing what we need to feed the longing.
Ah, what is soul making?
And soul making exactly that is finding ways to nourish the soul so it'll become more open to blossom inside of you. Its seed is always there. We wouldn't have a life without a soul. The body and soul are partners, they work together. But you have to feed it, otherwise you close it down. So soul making is try to find those influences that nourish it, not what diminish it or close it down. And that's, I think, is very important. That's the crisis, is that if we're not aware of the situation, we're not looking for the right food. We've been fed on fast food,
Yeah.
um, rather than seeking genuine nourishing food. And as we know, if you've tried fast food after 1 hour, your body's hungry again because it has no proper nutrients. It's just an illusion that you've been fed, but you haven't. We're still hungry. So if you're not feeding your soul, our soul is still hungry. And that what creates this deep longing and sadness. And that's why I think the world is out of balance because um, we're not correctly feeding what we need.
I think you can just binge your life away on the streaming services these days. Right? There's so many streaming services, at least where I am, showing all of these shows, and it's not just entertainment. I feel I mean, it is entertainment, but it's showing people's lives, and I can get so drawn into it as I'm
Mhm.
living through those actors, and so it's really addictive.
It's distractive. It's a distractive substitute. If you spend all your time with this distraction or entertainment, then you've fulfilled your hours in your day,
Yeah,
you know. But if I mean, how many people can just sit down and do nothing for 1 or 2 hours? Just sit down for 1 hour and just be with yourself and enjoy the silence. And what I've noticed actually recently in the last couple of years is an increasing nervous energy,
yeah,
you know, like as if people don't have something to do, they get nervous. I've seen people sitting in restaurants and their foot's tapping on the floor, they don't probably realize it, they're not conscious of it, and they're probably waiting for the food to arrive or they're waiting for the next hit on the phone. So this nervous energy is our body telling us that we're too conditioned to rapid stimuli and we need to bring it down. If you can sit down quietly in 1 hour without fidgeting and without moving your body, people may say, well, that's meditation. I don't do that. Well, just sit down, be with yourself. That's not meditation. It can be, but it's just being with yourself.
it's a
Um,
challenge.
yeah, without being bored. People are afraid. Another thing which crossed my mind. I think people are intrinsically afraid of being bored.
Yeah, I don't like it.
But what is being bored? I mean, if you can sit with yourself and not be bored, I think that's a pretty good sign. Because
Yeah,
what is being bored? We're alive. We're alive and we're breathing the air.
yeah.
On a good day, we have sunshine coming in. What's to be bored with?
No,
So
exactly. I'm
I
not
think,
bored.
yeah, we're not bored. It's just like we think, well, there's a difference between being productive. Now, I feel this as well is like, okay, I want to do certain things today. I want to accomplish something. So if I don't accomplish it, I think I could have done more today.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you mean about being bored is that you think I need to do something. Accomplishing something is good because it keeps you active and it keeps you with your intention. Um, but don't we don't have to define that as being bored if I don't accomplish something.
No.
Being bored is like I don't want to be. I need stimuli.
Mm,
That's
mm.
a different thing.
Okay, see, how you talk about soul making is rather than living lives as personalities, then we should develop senses of perception that are timeless.
Hmm. Did I write that?
You did. I'm taking
Um,
this from the book. Yeah.
yeah, right. Well, again, part of the deconditioning process is to realize when we're operating through our personality and when not. Because the personality, I mean, the word personality comes from persona and the
Mm,
Greek word for the mask that the actors wore on the stage. So a persona is a mask, and each personality is developed according to our nurturing, where were we born, what culture. Were we born into a family that gave certain values, moral values, religious values? So we have a personality. What language do we speak? How do we translate the world coming into us? No. So I was born in England. I have a personality which is very English, and mannerisms and behaviorisms. If we were born in different part of the world, would have a different personality. So that is acquired you, not essential you.
mm,
What is timeless is the essential you. So if we can, part of the deconditioning, if a person can realize what is the condition me and start to kind of step back and try to make more contact with what is the essential me, that's the timeless aspect I'm speaking of.
mm,
And everybody has a timeless you, an eternal you, an essential you.
mm. It's so interesting because, in a way, the longing for something like yeah, binging a TV show, something else that is a drug, is that it's the same longing for that timeless room where I can just forget about my personality for a while. Do you
Mhm.
see?
Yeah, I mean, that's why a lot of distractions or addictions are very tempting
Yeah.
because it can take us give us a break from our personality, especially if the personality is very dominant or heavy. And if we're not aware that we have an essential self, we spend all time in the dominant personality and we react to life. The personality doesn't respond or reflect, it reacts a lot more.
Hmm.
And so and it's tiring and we get angry, we get frustrated. So so conditioning and distractions like television entertainment gives a break from that. And that's why um it's so popular because people often feel the need to want to take them out of themselves. You hear the phrase, I'm going to see a film because it's mind candy, brain candy, it takes me out of myself.
Yeah.
Because essentially they just want to sit down for like 2 hours and just be taken away from their self.
Yeah.
And that's how it works.
Mm. Okay. And instead of that, I want to use our last time together to speak about sage talks, which
Mm.
is the title of your new book, right? So instead of that, we can speak to, do you say deities?
Deities.
Deities.
It's just tomato, tomato, different ways of
Okay. Yeah.
pronouncing it.
Yeah. Do you want to share about what is the premise of your book there and those talks?
Yes, I mean, again, it's so new. I don't have a copy myself. The publisher hasn't sent it to me yet. So
Okay.
now the idea is that the book is contains conversations with different gods, deities, and avatars. So I studied this actually a few years ago when I was writing a previous book called Bardo Times, one of the first books looking at the state of the world. And I was thinking, well, the state of the world, I see it like this, but who can I talk to, I want to talk to not just my friends, and I want to talk to some higher power, higher being that can explain the world to me. So I
Mm.
thought, well, what questions do I have? So I thought, well, if I have a question, let's say chaos, who's the avatar or deity for chaos?
Mm.
Or if I want to talk about time and transitions and transformations, what god deity is, you know, reigning over transitions and cycles? So in the pantheon of pagan religions, like in the Greek religions, in the Roman religions, in the Hindu religions, there's so many different gods for each thing. You know, there's
Yeah.
gods. So I thought, well, if I'm going to speak on this subject, I want to speak to this deity. What would they say? So I choose a range of 25 different deities, including Egyptian gods, Persian deities, and Hindu, Roman, and Greek. And I addressed them and I say, I have this question. And again, this comes back to our conversation earlier. It's all about opening yourself up to communication with your higher self or a higher force. And I don't know if I'm communicating with the God, a Greek God or Roman God. I don't know. But when I opened a conversation, I sat there, I cleared myself, and I let a voice come in. And the voice sounded different than me. Um, but of course, it's a part of me because I'm connecting with it. So is it my higher self? Is it the gods? I don't know, but it's another influence outside of me that was answering my questions.
And it's a way to still that longing we're talking about that I often find in movies. I mean, I think that is what draws me to sit there for hours and hours and watch. And then this is another imaginative space that you're talking about,
Yes,
right? I mean,
it's a, yeah,
it's
sorry.
similar, but it's more, it's like it's more, you're more there in a way too.
Yeah, we can call it creative imagination, but not in a fantasy way. It's the thing we've been speaking about really in this conversation is the art of communication.
Huh.
This is a theme that has been running through our talk. How do we
Huh.
communicate between people with
Mm.
questions? How to communicate with ourselves? And materialistic society has closed down our communication with ourselves and with the wider cosmos. So the book
Mhm.
Sage Talk is also trying to tell us we need to open ourselves up to wider communication because we're not alone. We're connected with higher powers, higher forces all the time. The world is infused with forces from the cosmos and energies and all the time. Even on
Yeah.
a even on a physical level, the Earth is impacted by solar radiation, gamma radiation, cosmic radiation. Everything is infused, but materialistic society has closed us down.
Mhm.
So I want to open up the art of communication, the art of contact, because
Yeah.
if you start to communicate with something beyond yourself, eventually you'll start to communicate with your higher self. It'll bring you back to yourself.
Mhm.
So, so really, on one level, yes, I'm talking to a deity about chaos, time, um, environment, or birth, death, love. I talk about all these subjects. But it's a conversation beyond ourselves, but it's also a conversation with ourselves. We're connecting the higher with the lower. And that's
Mhm.
what I wanted to emphasize. Humanity is in a constant communication between the higher and the lower, and we need to start to, you know, open up that communication channel.
I love it. I love it. And I've also been recently speaking about mediumship, and I feel it's all related however you want to speak about it. And I do think that something like watching movies or TV series is a substitute to that, because that's imagination that someone else is doing for you in a way,
Mhm,
right? Someone else is doing it, and then you're like, oh, and you feel
mhm,
like expanded a little bit from that to going into that dream space. But then you can do it on your own, and it's really interesting how you've been doing it from questions that you've had. You wanted to speak to
mhm,
someone, a higher force, about this. I like that.
mhm.
Did it
Yeah.
help then? Did it help for you to speak with them?
Yes, yes, it did. It did.
Okay.
It's can be interesting, intriguing, funny. I'm thinking, well, that's a good answer, or like that makes me think as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And after each conversation, I posted my reflections on the conversation.
Hmm.
And after the reflections, I post a wisdom tale or story as well. So the book is not just conversations. Each chapter is a conversation, a reflection, and a wisdom tale from the perennial traditions or wisdom traditions. I mean, the whole point is to make us reflect and consider and to stimulate us. Um, and I would just add about your comment about the media. We talk about the media being, this entertainment closing us down, but there are some times that the higher influences also try to seed ideas
Ah.
into media. So there are some films and many books as well which are stimulating. Even popular culture can seed ideas, such as through science fiction or fantasy films. But of course, the major industry like Hollywood, etc., has taken this category and completely monopolized and colonized it. So majority of films are completely programming or predictive programming. But
Yeah.
I often scan the media to see if something else is coming through. Because
Ah.
sometimes there's some seed you think, something has got into this film which is trying to get through to us. So that does happen.
Yeah. Something like a detective having to find the criminal, and then having to go into that space of being a little bit drugged, going into that liminal space in order
Mhm.
to get answers. Something like that.
Yeah, I think there are, I feel that there are many instances whereby some higher inspiration managed to creep into the film through the scriptwriter or the director without them knowing, just just to kind of get something out there. And like you said, if the attentive reader or viewer can pick it up, or it may influence them as well. So it's not all films are negative. There are ways to inspire us through creative
Yeah,
imagination is coming through all the time. It's trying to get through all the time.
I love that. And I love the way that you've taken this idea about sage talks, speaking to deities. Um, I'm just looking at one quote, Kingsley. This is what we've been talking about. You didn't see my email just in recent time, right? So you don't remember the quote. Um, but it's, as human beings, we need to guard against the disease of, do you say psychosclerosis?
Psychosclerosis. Yeah.
Did you made that up? Okay, good.
Did I make that? I think it is a term. Sclerosis is like a hardening.
Okay, a
So
psycho. Okay, okay. I just didn't know the term. You can explain it.
I've forgotten I even used that term, psychosclerosis. Um, Sclerosis is a hardening. Um,
Ah,
it's
okay.
like you can have a disease like liver sclerosis.
Okay, good.
It's
Then,
a hardening. Yeah.
because then you explain in the next sentence, you say the hardening of attitudes that causes a person to cease dreaming, visioning, imagining, and learning. It is the hardening of the mind so that we become unteachable and we stop learning and we stop growing. In such stage, a person can easily succumb to forms of social hypnotism and cultural brainwashing. So this is really important. I mean,
Mm,
however you want to, it's like a cycle. If we don't decondition, then we are easily controlled.
mm. Well, you've just taught me a new word back to me, psychosclerosis. I haven't heard that word for a long time, and I didn't know I'd written it. So, I don't, um, but I understand it, or I should do.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, so, so yes, I mean,
Uh,
that makes it's exactly what we've been talking about. And I also, and I think my sense also is like another term for psychosclerosis we can call stunted growth.
mm,
You know, so our society generally tries to stunt our growth, stop our growth psychologically, emotionally. A lot of impacts are trying to make us emotionally infantile. I think a lot of Hollywood programming is trying to make us emotionally infantile. Um,
like being dependent on a partner that's going to come and rescue you. Is that what you mean?
Yes, I mean that is you're always dependent on happy endings.
Oh, okay, okay.
The princess finds a dark prince, dark-haired prince,
Mm,
and all this stuff, or we just dependent on certain stimuli that the films provide. And of course, education is a conditioning, unfortunately. It says this is what is true, and every nation has their own history according to, makes them, according to their perspective. So everything is a conditioning. So if we stop critically questioning, that is when we have psychic sclerosis. We harden, we stop going further.
mm,
So for me, there's no end. If a person says, "Oh, I'm finished. I've got the best I can be," well, the best you can be for now. There can always be more. You can choose to like say, "I'm fine. I'm happy now." If you say, "I know the answer," maybe you know the answer for now. I mean, a few centuries ago, all the Galileo and the astronomers felt they had the answer. You know that this is how the solar system worked. Before that, there was the before the scientific revolution, the church said, the earth is the center of the solar system, the center of the universe. Everything revolves around us. That's the answer. Before that, it was everything's flat. You know, everyone has the answer for their time.
mm,
So science has says this is the world now, this is the cosmos. Psychology says this is the way the mind works. This is how we understand it. Quantum physics says this is how quanta and wave forms work for now.
yeah,
Because every time we move on, we expand our horizons of knowledge and understanding. So don't close down, don't harden ourselves. And even though we feel we know ourselves, we can always have an encounter, a learning situation that helps us to grow ourselves. So we learn about ourselves more. So
yeah,
that's the point I think I was saying that culture tries to stop our critical questioning and tries to say, don't grow anymore. We can provide everything. No, you've got to be curious. You've got
yeah.
to be poking things. You've got to be that person who pokes the hole and says, "No, there's a little bit more. I'm sure of it. I want to look over the horizon. Don't look. There's nothing there. I think there is."
Now we know there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speak to the deities about it, and that is really good, and it's something that I'm get in touch with as well when I'm defending or whatever I'm doing, trying to vote for psychotherapy. Then it's like uh, mm, it's like everything that gets a little bit materialized, it has the risk of getting stuck. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Even if it's a title, it's a system, whatever it is, it can also get stuck there. So absolutely want to keep
Mhm.
open the mind as much as, but that is the challenge, I think, in a material dense reality.
That's exactly the challenge because anything that comes into this materially dense reality after a time does get stuck. It's the
Yeah.
nature of our reality. So even if a great teaching came into our reality after a time, whether it's centuries, it gets crystallized, it gets stuck, and then institution grows around it, which is why you have to present it in a new form according to its time,
Mm.
according to the context, because things change. And so, yeah, things get stuck. It's the nature of a dense reality, which is why we have to keep kind of moving and being flexible and questioning because the answer for last week may not be the answer for you today.
Yeah. Good. I love it. Kingsley, we are ending here our conversation, but I usually end on some astrology. Did I did I offend you saying the sharp pen comment earlier?
No, not at all. I mean, I haven't heard that phrase. I just
But it
wanted
is
to.
also just powerful
Oh,
communication, it's many things. It's
yeah.
so it's not meant to be negative at all.
Well, that's fine. I didn't want to be sharp to be offensive. I wanted
No.
sharp to be stimulating. I
Yeah.
wanted I wanted just to kind of rephrase it. So sharp stimulating, yeah. I don't
But
want to
last
offend
time,
anybody.
no. Because you're such a sweet cancer person.
Or
And you are,
cancer.
yes, it's that. It's that.
Mhm.
No, but it's last time I compared you to a critical journalist, right? So it's kind of like going a little bit at it. What's not right in a sense. We want to expose that.
Yeah, you
Um,
want to look deeper. You want to critically question. A good
yeah,
journalist
critically
critically
question.
question.
That's
Yeah.
that's really good. That is really good for Mars Mercury that I'm talking about. Yeah. Do you have any like question around your chart or any curiosity around it, or how do you relate to your own astrology at the moment?
Um, No, not really. I mean, the only things I know about my chart is what people have told me because I don't have any ability to look into astrology. Interestingly, a friend did recently mention when they looked into my birth date that I have Libra ascending.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Can you talk about that then? Because
Sure.
before you talked about Cancer and that, maybe talk about my ascending.
Yeah,
If it's of interest to you or anyone
it's,
viewing.
I love it. Yes, it's for everyone who has Libra rising. Or ascendant, we can say that this is a new cycle that is in the becoming. That is, the ascendant is what we are becoming in this life. And it's about balance
Mhm.
that you've also spoke about today. It is about balance and and being in a balanced way from where you're not projecting onto others what you wish them to be, but being in like a fair relationship. Whereas what you come from, that is more common to your soul, is doing everything yourself because you're really good at it. And so when the Libra cycle, the Libra rising is coming in, it's like you need other people. And it's easier once I don't know if it's easier. It's at first it's harder when you retrieve your projections from other people, but then it becomes easier because then you are really truly equal to others. And and it's not like your way is the better way, and I'm not saying that you think it is. It's just when you have a Virgo on the 12th house cusp, you've been in lifetimes where you've had to take the responsibility yourself. And now you're being more balanced, meaning leaving some of that responsibility to other people, seeing that okay, they can take it in a way.
Mhm.
Yeah, but does that say something to you?
Well, it's a fair comment because perhaps part of my transmission to say, look, I present materials and stimulus for readers and for people, but it's your responsibility to go and take it and do it for yourselves.
Yeah.
And we have to walk our own path, and you can't ride a bicycle for another person. They have
Mhm.
to ride it themselves. You can show them the bicycle's on the floor over there, but it's up to you to pick it up and ride it. So I think it's a fair thing to say that, we have to, and Libras are maybe a good example. We have to share responsibility. We have to all do our part.
Absolutely. So that's just a little key for anyone who has Libra rising, actually, that there is something that the soul needs to ground now in fair relationships, equal relationships with others. So, but for you, it's also interesting because I'm sure your friend must have seen that you have Pluto very close to your ascendant and Uranus as well. Did he say something about that?
Something about that, but I didn't. They mentioned it, yeah, but I didn't know what that would mean if Pluto are near. Um, what does it mean? Is it
Yeah, what does it mean? It's not a
um,
simple thing. It's never a simple
mm,
thing. If you get like simple answers from astrology, always
mm.
question it. Always look deeper because it's not a simple thing. But I think it's just a big part of your personality is going deeper
Mhm.
and and higher at the same time. So
Pluto is dense but complex and powerful.
it's going into the underworld, and Uranus is taking us up to the higher perspective. And that Libra ascendant, that for many people can be a sweet front. For you, it might have been different. It might have been, I mean, I think you're good with social etiquette because of it as well. But then you might not last that long if something is off. Do you know what I mean? Then you'll be more critical than other people,
Mhm.
and you leave social societies where you're not able to be yourself. So for other people with Libra risings, they might be nicer,
Mhm.
be able to be nicer for a longer time, but you're not supposed to be that, you know.
Mhm. Well, that makes sense. I don't stick around if it's not for me, and I kind of step back as well in the last year or so more. I live in the country now, and I don't, I take a step back from. I don't engage in the toxicity, and yeah, I don't push against it or criticize. I say, look, you look at yourself or look at this, and I'm to take a step back. Um, Maybe part of my balancing act.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I love it.
Mhm.
That's really good. Yes, we got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always the thing, is that astrology is like representing, symbolizing something that is going on in your life. So as we speak, it becomes clearer what it's all about,
Mhm.
rather than just some standard that is always this way. That's the thing where you can have keywords and you know something about Mars, Mercury, but then how does it come
Mhm.
forth in you? And it's more complex than that. Yeah.
It is. And how do you work through it as well? Because
Mm,
one thing
yeah.
is having the
Yeah.
impacts and the environment. The other thing is how do you respond to that and work through it?
Absolutely.
And that is down to each individual. Um, so again, I think what we've been saying is that a lot of, we all have our own work to do in
Yeah.
certain ways,
Mm,
and we should take that upon us with again with a smile, with a bit of joyful attitude that I want to work on myself. I want to be more critical. I want to observe myself. Sometimes it may be a little uncomfortable for myself, but you know, I'm breathing. I'm listening to the birds. I see the blue sky. I'm alive. You know, I'm going to treat my work with a bit of joy.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you have to. You
Mhm.
you have to put that humor in there. No, that's really good. Yeah, we all have phases to go through, and I'm excited to be reading your new book.
Well, thanks, and I hope you enjoy it, and hope you enjoy some of their responses. Some were different. Some were a bit harsh with me, and the others were not joyful. You
Oh,
never know.
interesting.
Some
Ah,
some were like wagging their fingers, and others were saying, "No, no, no, we're not as bad as you think we are. We know. We're happy to communicate with you."
I'm gonna take that side then.
And I think the point is we can all communicate with the world around us, our
Yeah.
higher selves or the deities. It's not down to just one person or to a few people. We can all do it. So, we can just sit down and just sit down and have a conversation with yourself. You know, it
Mhm.
may sound a bit weird, but just do it. We're we're happy to speak to ourselves.
I think that is what the inspiration is gonna be from that book. Is when we see you do it, then like be inspired to do it yourself.
Yeah, we're a communicative species, and so we should not forget that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much,
Mhm.
Kingsley Dennis, for this conversation. and
No,
all of your
Mannah, it's a
inspiration out
pleasure.
there.
Always a pleasure speaking with you. So, who knows? Maybe the conversation will continue
I would love to.
another
I would love
time.
to. I would
Mhm.
love to.